So, in the meantime, I would like to welcome everyone here who has so far joined us. Today, we are celebrating International Day of Plant Health. And plant health is a very important topic, and Plant Health Day is a very important day for ISF. It's something that we've supported since the very beginning, since its conception until its culmination to the International Year of Plant Health in 2020, and now the International Day of Plant Health, which we celebrate every year. This year's theme is Plant Biosecurity for Food Security. And our session aims to tackle exactly that by exploring how artificial intelligence and digital tools support the aims of biosecurity for food security. And we are very, very delighted today to have guests outside of the traditional ISF circles to talk to us about their initiatives, and also as seed companies and as associations, what we can learn from their initiatives and how we can support, perhaps, whether that's through partnerships or through other means of support. As I said, we kindly ask all participants to keep their microphones muted unless invited to speak. If you have any questions during the session, the chat is open. These questions can be saved there, and we will bring them up later during the Q&A part. But also later, we will invite people to even unmute themselves to potentially speak up and share their question. So today we had around 160 registrants for this webinar, which is great, from 45 countries and representing 130 different companies and organizations. So I think the topic resonated, at least within the community of ISF. And so we're very excited to get started. And with that, so first of all, my name is Ira, Communications Director at ISF, and I will be moderating today's webinar. And I am very, very pleased to have on screen the speakers for this session today. Let me start to formally open us. We have ISF President Arthur Santos-Atzavar. Santos, the floor is yours.
Hi, good day, everyone. Good morning and afternoon, evening, depending on where you're from. I thank you all for participating in this very important interaction and webinar today. And ISF is glad to see a wide participation, as mentioned by Ira, from almost 45 countries. So we're really happy to see that. And also, we like to thank David, Steve, Ellen, and everyone who has agreed to do the keynote. And we really look forward to the keynote address, which is going to address in depth about AI and related matters. So just a few words from me as the opening remarks. I'd like to say that, the food security, biosecurity for food security. So food security means a lot to us in today's world, especially with so many problems that we are facing, whether it's, the poverty or which is addressed in the Sustainable Development Goal 1, 2, and 10, which is no poverty, zero hunger, and equal reduced, and also the few strategic goals of better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life. So this really leads us to where we are going now in terms of AI with respect to the whole production part of seeds, the movement of seeds, and also the safe and biosecurity where it comes in is the safety of these seeds till it reaches the farmer. Now, this process is very complex because it starts from seed production. It goes into the seed processing. It gets into seed conditioning, seed testing, and finally starts crossing borders. And this involves a lot of stakeholders. It involves the seed companies. It involves the governments. It involves policymakers. It also involves the local authorities, especially if it's inter-country, intercontinent, along with in some places also intra-state. In some places we see that. So this is where the confluence of ideas in terms of the convergence points of all technologies that are available, especially through AI, as an enabler for plant biosecurity makes a lot of sense. Whether it's systems for processing, analyzing data, aiding in detection, predictive analysis, and really it will help the convergence of several data sources sets in a more productive manner. And this is very important because huge data is being handled and it's almost exhaustive. And sometimes, for example, in certain governments, we know they don't even have the capacity to process it. So this is where the human expertise can be blended with AI and utilized to give better results, quicker, more accurate results, even if whether it's detection, just processing of data, and everything that's related to AI. Now, one thing we know is that AI is as good as the information that's being fed in. So the monitoring process, the detection process, and all these factors have to be very, very critical. And that's when the AI can be leveraged to the max. But I also want to mention here as a rider that everything changes constantly. And as we speak, maybe the new AI rules are being made so that it becomes easier as a function. But is not just it's a very, very broad terminology for AI and machine learning. And I really look forward to the keynote presentation. And at ISF, we are also constantly engaging, physically going to many of the countries, interacting, making presentations and webinars so that we are sensitizing people to the new technologies, science-based approaches. And we are constantly doing that in continents across the world so that ultimately we facilitate safe movement of seed, giving safe movement of seed and also the biosecurity and safety of these seeds till it reaches the last mile, that is the farmer. So having said this, I want to hand it over now for the keynote after Lorena. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Santosh. So I would then like to call on our Vice President of ISF and President of Biosecurity based in Argentina, Lorena, to give her opening remarks.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are, and thank you, Ira, for your introduction. Arthur explained very well how innovation, including AI and the use of data, can help make seed movement safer, more efficient, and better supported by science. I would like to build from this point by adding a broader perspective from the seed sector. Plant health is the goal, but plant security is the system that helps us to protect it. And for the seed sector, plant biosecurity should be seen as an enabled system, a system that protects, of course, plant health, but also create the trust and the predictability needed for healthy seed and innovation to move safely across the borders. This is very important because innovation could only be or have real value if it's reach to farmers. A better variety, healthier seed, new technology cannot contribute to food security if it remains blocked somewhere in the system or it's arrived too late. So, in simple words, biosecurity should be a bridge and not a bottlenecks, excuse me. It's a bridge, in my opinion, between science and policy, between regulators and seed sector. It's a bridge between countries, and of course a bridge between the innovation and the farmers. This is very aligned with ISF work and priorities, supporting science-based rules, international recognized standards, strong phytosanitary systems, public and private collaboration, and the safe movement of seeds. The theme today is plant biosecurity for food security, and that captures very, very well because plant biosecurity is about protecting crops, but also creating the condition for resilient agriculture, innovation, and of course for food security. So thank you, and I look forward for the discussion, the next discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. And thank you again, Arthur, for your opening remark and for joining us today, which is, of course, a sign of just how important Plant Health Day is to all of us here at ISF. So without further ado, I would like to call on our presenters who are all sharing one screen. So that's the nice surprise for everyone. So please, I will just call on David, start the presentation, and feel free to introduce yourself as we go along.
Yeah, thank you, Ira. So first, I want to say thanks to Arthur, Ira, Lorena, Rose, and everybody at ISF for graciously inviting us all to present some of our work to you all. So we're very thankful. Good. Okay. So my name is David Guerena. I'm my colleagues, Ellena Girma, Steve Mutuvi, who we'll meet later, and Lennart Woltering, who you also meet a bit later. And we're representing an organization called the CGIAR. So jumping right in, thanks a lot. So we're here because it all starts with a seed, right? And we're at the ISF webinar now, and we're going to present the work for the next several minutes about our work in relation to seed variety production. So just as a brief introduction, we're part of the international conglomeration of research centers called the CGIAR. And this is going to be 17 or so affiliated research centers working at the international level. And many of you may have heard of us, others may have not heard of us, but we are kind of the stewards of the global biodiversity for crops around the world. So within our portfolio, I think we manage around 60 or crop portfolio that enables around 60% of all human calories. And we have a pretty big impact on the world's agricultural production. So over the past 50 years, there's been about a $60 billion investment in the CGR network, and there's been a return of investment of $600 billion. So a pretty strong impact from a public nonprofit research organization. Many of you may have been familiar with some of our work in global seed vaults and sort of the genetic resource conservation systems that we have. So the image on your left is the Svalbard Seed Vault, which is held in the Arctic Circle in Norway, which houses the world's majority of crop biodiversity in seeds and propagated materials. And so one of our key roles is to basically be stewards from a global public good for all of the world's genetic biodiversity for crop species. And so from there, we want to focus it on plant breeding. And, as you all know, plants didn't just evolve to be crops that we eat. There's been a lot of design efforts that have gone behind that. For instance, this is the evolutionary evolving of maize from teosinte, which is the plant on the very top, to maize on the very bottom. And in between has been thousands of years of R&D basically across multiple different countries and peoples and time to be able to get this way. Sorry, it's a bit noisy here. Skips a second. Apologies. We're actually on an agricultural research station. So there's tractors and other things going by from time to time. So we'll see how it goes from there. So in plant breeding, traditionally, we start with sort of manual-based phenotyping. This is observing with eyes and ears and fingers and toes how plants are growing. And from there, then we collect data. So human observation gets turned into qualitative estimates. And from that perspective, we're able to make decisions about which varieties to breed, which ones not to breed, which lines to advance, which lines not to advance. And this is a slow process. So traditionally, we estimate that it takes about 10 years from beginning to end to develop a new variety. And when modern plant breeding started, let's say the early 1900s, a 10-year time window was maybe sufficient to capture all the environmental change that was occurring. But if we look at today, a 10-year time window is not insufficient in order for us to keep pace of things like climate change. So we need to really think through how we can better speed up the process of plant breeding, particularly towards the conversation today around plant health. Not only is climate change, advancing rapidly things such as heat and drought stress, but we're also seeing widespread movements and evolution of pests and diseases across the world that we haven't seen before. And so there's a lot of risks available at the moment that if nothing changes in the plant development process, we may be at risk for a lot of things beyond just climate change, but also infectious diseases and pests for our global food security. So over the past, let's say, 20 years or so, there's been a large evolution and rapid advancement of technology in how we can better address newer tools for plant breeding. So on the top left, we have these large gantry systems that were set up that are mostly stationary to collect really high resolution imagery data to be able to substitute some of the human-based measurement systems that we have. Rovers on the left-hand side have been emerging more so over the past 10 years. And then relatively recently, we have the emergence of drones as a phenotyping platform to be able to convert digital imagery into useful plant breeding information. And so from there, we can collect really detailed mosaics of spatial and temporal spectral signatures that can allow us to assess how varieties are performing in time and space. So that has been happening, I think, for the past 15 years or so. And really in the past 5 years, we've seen very large advancements in mobile phone-based imaging. So one of the biggest ones in regard to plant health was classification. So an example here is what's happening to my tomatoes. So from an individual image, we can then run through smartphones, computer vision algorithms that are classification, and that can tell us sort of assessment of what's happening to individual plants. And so there's been a lot of development of commercial and also public sector companies and institutions and apps that have enabled sort of this process to happen. So what's nice is that we're moving away from sort of these sanitary structures, such as those gantries and rovers, into something that was held in a smartphone that you can take basically anywhere around the world. So it enabled the widespread adoption and scalability of some of these very high intensity, high computational computer vision algorithms. So from there, we're now thinking through from what a disease is this. And so that was in a question in 2010 was a very hard computer vision problem to solve. In 2026, with a lot of advancements in some of the computer vision algorithms, it becomes relatively easy. What's nice about that is there's a very strong application for farmers' use cases. Now, so you can put a handheld mobile phone in the farms anywhere around the world, and you can collect really good, useful information. And what we've been thinking about now is beyond what type of disease or what type of issue is affecting your plant to how bad is this? And this is really incidences and severity of plants, pests, and diseases. And in 1982, this was really impossible to be able to do something like this. And when we're moving into 2026, we went from impossible to very difficult. So we're now looking through, and we'll be presenting the rest of this presentation, our work and try to understand sort of how we can estimate or how we can use computer vision to determine estimates and severity of pests and diseases. And we're able to then to attract really research collaborators at the highest level of the technology industry. So within the space, we have active research collaborations with Google Research and also the AI division at Meta. And so what we're looking at building is looking at substituting sort of human manual observations with machine observations. And what's nice about that is it provides us with quantitative estimates of some of the plant responses to the environment that you can't see, or at least you can't quantify with human vision. So moving past our ability to capture quantitative information with computer vision, we're also looking at sort of the breeding systems that go around production of varieties. So modern breeding systems, again, evolved in the early 1900s, and they principally came from the global north in the US Midwest. And the research stations in the Midwest where, modern sort of plant breeding methods were developed more or less equates to what the farms in the region would look like. So this is a half a kilometer by half a kilometer farm in Iowa. This is a maize farm in Iowa. Again, when these plant breeding systems evolved, the differences because of the location in the global north between research station and on farm was not that much. But when you think about in 2026, and we think about specifically in the global south, the same type of maize farm would look like this. So you get a much more complicated landscape that necessarily the assumptions that we have that whatever varieties are performing that we're measuring on a research station will perform well on farm is not necessarily true. In addition to that, especially in the global south, you get a lot more diversity in sort of needs and use cases and varietal properties that are demanded by farmers that weren't necessarily understood at the beginning from the variety development process. So within this, we're basically thinking about a paradigm of the breeding and the breeding station of what I think you do and what I think you want. Whereas in reality, what farmers are saying is, this is actually what I do, and these are things that I want. So we don't necessarily need to be thinking about only breeding for very nice, neat rows when we know farmers are broadcasting their seeds, that the plant population environment on a farm is going to look a lot different than the plant population environment that it looked like on station. In addition, like this woman on the bottom, cooking time becomes a very important property in a lot of the production conditions in the global south, but also in the global north with higher energy prices, cooking for, canned beans or canned grains becomes really important. So maybe we should think about what are some of the use cases beyond just necessarily yields, but also, how do they integrate within agroecologies on farm? Then how do we accommodate also for a larger variety of use cases? And so in this context, we've been developing some novel tools that then leverage another branch of AI beyond computer vision. This is going to be speech to text, natural language processing, and large language models to be able to really assess from users directly what their needs and use cases are and integrate that with some of our computer vision efforts. So now I want to hand it over to my colleague, Ellena, who will then talk in more depth about some of our work with computer vision.
Alrighty, thank you, David. So first, just to echo all the different things David has said about our current landscape, the heart of breeding is phenotyping. So measuring how crops grow, how much they yield, and how well they're faring off generally. And this is done comparatively as well. So to do this comparatively, you have to collect a lot of data to be able to properly assess which one is doing better, which one is better suited for certain environments or conditions. And this is traditionally done on pen and paper everywhere, even today. So as hard work as it is, as tedious as it is very prone to error because we have a lot of measurement error associated with it. We also have location error where people collect things differently, and thus it all comes to less accurate data sometimes. And it also limits how many sites we can effectively collect that kind of data from. To release a variety that we think is going to work at many places, we should be able to test it as many places as possible, right? That's what would make it representative. But we struggle to have as many technicians out and about across a specific landscape that we're trying to cover. And when we do have tools that enable high phenotyping efficiency or high throughput phenotyping, they are very high tech and thus not accessible everywhere. So we have tools that come in and only one person is skilled to operate it. And if that person leaves, it no longer becomes operational. So this also comes into if that technology breaks down and so on and so forth. So what we here are trying to develop is something that can work everywhere, that is immediately accessible. And what better way to start than a phone, right? So our whole pipeline consists of collecting imagery and then annotating them. So just looking at the image and trying to train the model of what it should learn, what a breeder would look at instead, and then developing the models and finally getting results out. So we start with our mobile app called Ona, coming from the verb kuona, to see, which is in Swahili where we're based in Tanzania. And the app is clean data collection. You select what trial you're going to be operating today. You start collection and then you go. It's automated image capture all throughout your fields. And then the companion to Ona is Bruno, our push card that is made out of just metals that are easily available here and like quick, small, like phone holders. So just to help you understand what Bruno kind of looks. Alrighty. So through this tool set of Ona and Bruno or any other general phone capture, we've captured about 7.4 million images covering 18 different crops. This is across grass, legumes, and more. And specifically with the tool set of Ona and Bruno, we've been able to develop models for 3 traits for bush bean, and we've deployed this at 2 countries already. So first, what we offer here is scalability across sites. Within Tanzania, with just mobile phones, we're able to hit the bigger sites. So those are the bigger dots with both Bruno and Ona. But if we just want to move capture away from stations, a phone can be easily deployed by itself as well. So that gets us there. And also the protocol that we're trying to develop to enable capture is scalable across countries as well. So context is really important for us. And whatever we create must work in all the different areas we're trying to target in the global south. So the next piece is annotation. So we have all these different imagery, right? Like 7.4, for example, a million images, and we have to be able to train a model for what it's supposed to look at. For example, for disease, the first image on the left, you can see we've segmented out, so just drawn around the different plant parts that are important to look at. In this case, those are the leaves of the plant. And then within the leaves, what are the different things that denote disease, right? There are certain lesions that we can draw around as well, and we label them and classify them. And thus we're able to move from just typical, this image has a plant of disease of rust, for example, to this areas of the plant are actually affected by rust. This percent of the plant is affected by rust and this other disease, and get much more quantitative data or a better breakdown of what that disease, how that disease is presenting for that population. And then we have a simpler task that we do as well. If we put boxes around plants, we can do more basic but very important count tasks that are particularly tedious and interesting pain point for breeding teams as well. So plants are easier, but if you think like sorghum grain, a lot more things to count, right? And if we're able to deploy counting of sorghum grain, it's not a destructive method anymore. You can actually track it throughout the season much earlier than harvest. So if this is just a quick little video of what annotation looks like. So we're just selecting the different parts. All the different dots you see, the squares that show up are all the points we have to put there. It's it's a big task, and you have to do it for each different trait that you're trying to get a model to understand. But it's been able to work for us so far. And the models that we develop from these annotations are very fit for purpose. For example, we've collected an imagery type that allows us to see all the plants in one plot. This one is a 4.5 meter by 2 meter plot, and we can see all the plants here as a human, right? And so we train the model, okay, count all the plants in the image. But after talking to breeding teams, we've ascertained that certain breeding teams want to know how many plants per row, and others want to know specifically only the middle 2 rows. They don't really care what's happening on the outer rows of a given plot. So we developed a crop row model, and now altogether we're able to deliver the number of plants in the middle 2 rows, which is the area they care about. So models are very fit for purpose, and the output of our models are directly usable in current breeding pipelines already for decision making. And then that was more of when you're able to capture a specific trait in one image altogether, but sometimes you're not able to. So we have to turn these image level outputs of the model into plot level. So we have our plant and flower detection model that's important for things like days to flowering, whether it's 50%, 95%, all of those traits across crops. This is an example of how it looked like. So you'd capture the images as you walk alongside the plot. We'd run the model on those images, and we'd have to deliver days to 50% flowering. And in this case, you can see a simple plot of days on the y-axis, and then the percent of plants with at least one open flower on the y-axis. And through time, we're able to show the tracking of how many percent of those plants have at least one flower, which is what breeders are looking for. And the important delivery that a trait they're trying to observe is, at what point do I reach 50%? How many days after planting do I reach that? And for us to validate our tools and our methods, we've collected this data through trained technicians to get accurate data in the way that they would typically collect. So without a phone or without images, just themselves observing every day in, day out, and then recording it. And then our team also capture images alongside, and then we were able to get on the exact same day to validate our methods. And then at the very end, what we aim to deliver is a dashboard of sorts where breeders can track what's happening to their plots along the seasons for many different traits, whether it's flowers, pods, plants. And this kind of system is very important because breeders with more information on what to implement are not always available at all the different sites that they would like to collect data from. And so they can get quick pings. For example, on the bottom left plot, you can see plant count. And after we reach a specific time of total plant count, you see it actually drops. So around the 15th of April, it drops. And that can be a technician just flagging to their breeder, hey, something is going on here. And the breeder receives a notification right there in the system and is able to make a decision on it. And take something like flowering, for instance, where they care about the number of open flowers and they're able to see clearly on the plot how that changes throughout the season. The time where the number of open flowers drops should be when open flowers are converting to pods. So we're able to see in a plot, in a dashboard like this immediately on the bottom right, for example, that the flowers have converted to pods because on the 30th of April, where the open flower count is dropping, that's when the pod count is rising. So the results that we provide to breeders will be immediately actionable. And this is great for breeding teams, but I'm going to hand it over to Steve that's going to tell you a little bit about why we need to go beyond the breeding sites.
Thank you, Ellena. So as Ellena mentioned, and as David also mentioned, most of the attention has been on breeding, where breeders who are researchers and experts are building varieties that are presumably resilient to the various climatic conditions. But it is important to also check with the ultimate end user, in this case the farmer, how the varieties are doing in their actual fields. And this is where it becomes important to collect data from the farmers themselves. And one of the challenges we've seen is that new varieties are not being adopted at a rate that would be acceptable, despite being better varieties, resilient to diseases and so on. And so the question is, why is there a disparity between adoption and creation of new varieties? A solution would be to collect data from the farmers. It's not easy to collect data from farmers because of many challenges, as you can see in these images. In one of our recent data collection exercise, we were able to encounter such challenges, poor infrastructure. Also, sometimes there are literacy gaps, which make it difficult to communicate to the farmers. But with our solutions, we are able to collect data from farmers in a language that they understand and deep in remote areas where otherwise it would be challenging to access. Traditionally, data collection from farmers or from people in remote locations would require surveys, which are quite expensive and not able to reach as many people as possible. And one of the challenges with interviews, for example, or some other forms of data collection tools, which, for instance, use multiple choices, would be breadth that lacks insights or deep insights. But whenever also there's depth, we tend to miss out on the scale. So we are looking at a way in which we can address the trade-off between the depth and the richness of data, as well as the breadth and the scale of the data that we are collecting. And that is where our solutions are coming in to fill that gap. And in order to do that, we also need to be aware of the costs. At the moment, it's quite expensive to collect data from a household in the range of 170 USD for the interviews. If we could lower this to even lower cost, I think this is something great for data collection. In order to do that, we've been deploying a numerator approach where youth from those communities are involved to collect data. And the data collection, as I mentioned, involves recording farmers as they speak in their language. We've started with Swahili, where we've been able to access 374 farmers already and collected data across different regions in Tanzania, now moving to Kenya. And what we are seeing is that farmers are able to provide rich and detailed feedback about the varieties they grow. So we went out and we wanted to know why they liked certain varieties, why they disliked other varieties. And the fact that we are using enumerators who are young people from the community, the farmers are able to express themselves more freely, giving us quite a lot of data in qualitative format that we can further analyze using AI approaches, as I'll be mentioning. And for this, we are seeing that new traits are being discovered beyond the known traits. And also, we are also targeting expansion to more languages, especially languages that are spoken by many people across Africa. These are just some that we are targeting in the medium term, but we plan to extend across Africa and other regions. We are also considering the common high resource languages as well, so that we can make sure that our tool is able to be used in many regions as possible across the world. And going to the details of the process, the first step involves collecting the data, where we leverage dynamic prompting. And by dynamic prompting, we mean the models are able to ask the next questions. We know that people are good at asking follow-ups, but sometimes we might not have a standardized way of doing it across our enumerators. So by allowing the models to generate the prompts, we are able to get deeper insights. And the other important thing is that we are also doing this offline. In most regions where we collect the data, we do not have internet. And so it's important for the models to run offline so that we can be able to work in regions with low connectivity. Once we collect the data, it's not manually transcribed. One of the challenges why qualitative data analysis has been challenging in the past is because one needed to listen through the audios and manually type the transcriptions. But with these tools, with the models that we have built, we are able to automatically transcribe that data, say from Swahili audios into the corresponding text, which is further processed using a large language model. We know that LLMs have become so powerful, the likes of Gemini, ChatGPT. They are able to extract traits, and not only the traits, also they are able to capture the sentiments and the emotion of farmers, providing quite rich insights into the conversations that we're having with the farmers. And all these analysis will surface some interesting clusters of topics which can further be analyzed using advanced AI approaches such as topic modeling to gather the different topics and the subtopics in those topics. For example, in this case, we have topics related to stresses, including diseases, and we can see that we on the left, far left, we can see the smaller subtopics such as leaf curling and so on, all which was extracted by the AI models. But on the right, it's interesting that we can even find new traits that are not listed in existing trait ontologies. And so beyond just the grouping of topics, we are able to encode the gender and other demographic related insights, where for women, we saw that they talk more about the cooking time, the taste or grain quality, while for the men, they focus mostly on the agronomy and yield related traits. And this kind of provides some insights on what the different demographics are talking about. And out of the research that we are doing, we want to build a data collection tool, a voice-first AI-driven data collection app that not only collects the data, but provides automated way to analyze that data in real time or near real time and be able to provide insights in a scalable way at a high speed that allows for researchers and breeders or other interested parties to make decisions. Yeah, and so I think I'll hand it over to my colleague Lennart to talk more about scaling.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll be the last one doing the musical chairs, where everybody kind of rotates around the chair. I want to talk a little bit about what this means if you all put this together, where we are today and where we want to go, hopefully together with you. So as Steve was explaining, this is a technology that actually opens up a lot of employment opportunities for youth. In this case, Juma, he was a graduate from the university here, but he didn't have a job. So he went back to his village, but he has a phone, right? So we were able to connect with him and basically feed him the kind of questions that he's asking to his peers in his community, right? And because of micropayment possibilities in Tanzania with M-Pesa, some of you may be familiar with it, we're basically able to give him a job opportunity, right, or a job. So we're creating new roles here for rural youth. Now, if you put that together, so for example, knowing what the farmers want, like what are your preferences, what actually are you looking for? You combine that with the technology that Ellena presented, ONA, can we get actually what they want to have, right? You do it in the breeding, in the experimental station. By the way, that is at the cost of even less than $1,000, right? The smartphone's 250 and the Bruno pushcart is around 300. So you have a very well-functioning phenotyping system for less than $1,000. Now, once you develop those varieties, you basically want to test them with the farmers. And there, you can again use Sikia and say, okay, well, how does this actually perform? Maybe the top 3 or top 10 varieties that we came up with, right? So in that way, you really get to a closed circle where these technologies all fit together, right? Am I still there?
No.
Sorry, I was blocking my own screen, so I couldn't see my screen. Sorry. You see, for a team that is so digitally apt, we have a lot of problems with the presentation. You see. Sorry for that. And now there's a plane passing by. We go back to what is the impact on people. So if you combine this, the Sikia and the ONA, find, for example, that women are much more concerned about cooking time. And it makes a lot of sense because they're spending a lot of time cooking beans. Sometimes it takes 6 to 10 hours to cook beans in your house. And you need to collect firewood for that. You, but also your daughters, most likely. And then they can't go to school, right? So you find that this is important. And then you develop faster cooking beans. Actually, the people that sit just 2 doors down, they are developing those varieties, the breeders here that sit with us. And you actually have a lot of impact on that family because they don't need to go and look for a lot of firewood. They don't need to spend so much time doing that. And you actually have also ecological benefits by cutting less. So you have a lot of kind of like complementary kind of benefits from these kind of insights that you can gather, right? Now that's at the personal level, at the farmer level, of the community level, but also for breeding teams. If you're twice as accurate or twice as efficient, we found with an ex-ante analysis on database in Nigeria that you can actually save 50% of the labor. And if you look at a whole, let's say, multi-location trial, you can see a 17% cost saving. This can be at a cost of $150,000. You're talking about $25,000 $100,000 savings, right? But also, if you have better data and you can do it faster, you actually have better varieties being developed, which also adds to a net present value of your breeding team as such, because whatever you produce, it's better and it gets to the field faster. If you look at society, as David already said in the beginning, investing in crop improvement has a lot of economic returns. And you see that with Sikia, if you can have varieties that are better adapted to actually what the farmers really want, female and male and youth and others, you would see adoption rates going up, right? And as David already showed, the economic return to crop improvement is about 1 to 10. So I think it has a lot of positive impacts from the farmer to breeding teams to society. So where are we today? Today we are working. We have basically ready tools for beans, sorghum, and cowpea, and we're moving into the other staple crops that the CJR is working on, such as maize and rice and other crops. We have been focusing, or we are ready to deliver, let's say, the plant stand, the plant count, right, the flower count, and the bean count, or the bean count in this case. And we're moving now into developing the plot quality, and hopefully we'll have disease traits also ready soon. That's something that we've been working on as well, as David explained. In terms of languages, we're focusing on English and Swahili, and we're moving into French, Hausa, Yoruba, and other languages for Sikia. We've been focusing, of course, so far on the breeding case, but you can imagine that this can also apply to many other kind of like use cases, especially in agronomy, use of fertilizer response or pesticide response or other kind of responses on the farm that you can see in the crops response, right? Also, everything that Ellena showed you were custom made models. I saw also a question in the chat like, okay, you cannot just transfer whatever is happening in the global north and apply it here. We know that because we actually have to retrain the models all using our own images that we've collected here, because a maize model that works for Iowa doesn't necessarily work for Western Kenya, right? So those custom models, and since we're also a public agricultural research institute, we have been getting support from philanthropy and others. So what we're also developing are model gardens, so that enable other teams to develop models for their own crops of their own interest, right? So it's also kind of like we're accelerating the use of these kind of models with others. A lot of the work, it has been spread out, but it has really focused a lot on East Africa, where we are based. And the next market for us, of course, would go to the entire global south, where the entire CJR is operating, but also then, of course, globally, right? It has focused a lot on the work on ONA, has been focused on the on station, let's say, on the research station. That's where we're doing a lot of the experiments, but especially with Sikia allows us to also use computer vision and other kind of innovations that we're working on to the on-farm and really get contextual data back from there, and also the ability to share that back to the farmers then, right? We are now at a point where we are moving from being a project or projects, the Artemis project and then DZ project, to thinking about how can we also serve other markets, for example, the commercial market. And that's just basically impossible or very hard in the kind of current institutional setup. So we have been having discussions, and we're developing business models around venturing out into our own entity called Tatu, so to also serve different kind of markets. So you see a lot of development going on in many different areas. And to fund all that, we are actually looking at the moment at a funding for around 30 million to enable 1,000 public plant breeding teams to use this, and thereby actually supporting the food security of almost 500 million people, smallholder families. We do it in a staged approach, like 5 million for the first 2 years, and then additional funding. But that's what actually our funding targets are, and that's what we are. We're talking to different foundations and then other people about. So we're really also eager to collaborate with those here in the call or that want to see the recording. Of course, around testing the tools, working with us together to develop different models for different use cases, and of course expand the capacity to deliver. And this is the lovely team that we have here in in Arusha, or at least a year ago, I think this picture is taken. Yeah. So if you want to learn more, we have, I think, a very up-to-date website here. You can see it. I've also put it in the chat. We have a very active team on Instagram as well. It's really, they post a lot of fun stuff. And yeah, I think really recommend joining us. Of course, on the science, we have articles. This is, I think, one that has a very broad description of what we do. But also, if you're into podcast, we have a very nice podcast with David that was taken with Astro Teller of the Google X lead. So I think just putting it all together, I think what we've talked about is that public or any breeding needs better evidence from the fields, but also from the farmers. And when we started this project, we didn't know. We didn't know if this is actually possible with smartphones and all that, but we've kind of proven that ONA can work. It's a smartphone digital phenotyping tool, and it actually delivers at a very high quality. And at the same time, developing a tool like Sikia allows you to collect data basically anywhere, because you can mobilize, let's say, youth in the community. You don't even have to go to the field yourself, right? You can basically, anybody with a smartphone can collect very high quality data. And with better data at scale, much faster, we also develop better varieties for farmers, and thereby address a lot of the challenges around climate change and climate adaptation for farmers and communities. Thank you for that. I also want to thank our donors so far, the Gates Foundation, and yeah, happy to take any questions from you. So let me hand back to the facilitator. Thank you.
Thank you, Lennart, and the rest of the team. Thank you so much for that presentation. I think it was quite comprehensive. I see some comments coming in the chat as well. So I know in terms of time, it's quite tight. So we have 5 minutes left. And there are some nice comments in the chat. If anybody would like to unmute themselves and ask a question, now is your chance. But otherwise, while you're waiting, I would like to see if Rose is back. Yes. So Rose, I know you're joining us from Rome on the Committee of Phytosanitary Measures meeting, but as you led in the organization of this webinar, maybe you have something to share with everyone.
Thank you so much, Ida. I hope everybody can hear me. And it's really a pleasure to be here with you all. An absolutely fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for the moderation, Ida, and for the team, for Steve, for David, for Ellen, everyone. I think that really you brought something very different. We needed to start to look at food security, development of new varieties, and the work of the seed sector in a way that we started to understand that how there's a desalination, how the artificial intelligence could be the way going forward. Really, really appreciate. And I think this is what we're going to need to start to look going forward. I think AI tools or tools like the ones that you guys have presented, this is really, really good. So thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you for all the effort to be able to be here. And the call for action, it has been listened. I can tell you for the colleagues who are here in Rome, they will present here. We're all having you guys, we're all listening. And so I can tell you that you're going to have quite a few people who will reach out to you. So thank you so much, and hand it back to you, Ida.
Thank you, Rose. So yeah, again, for those who, we're running out of time, but for those who would like to ask more or follow up, your point of contact is ISF for now. And then after this meeting, so we will create a kind of email list with people so that also our colleagues from CIAT and Bioversity International can also reach out to you if there's any interest in exchanges. And also I mentioned that this is just probably the starting point, Rose, because we do know that we have, for example, our Congress happening in Lisbon next week, where we will be continuing discussions on plant health and also innovations around plant health, such as including these kinds of tools. We have colleagues from CGIAR joining there as well. So we can continue the conversations there in Lisbon, bring this project up, and try to spotlight it more, even for colleagues that are on site. And potentially, continue it next year, maybe when we go to our next World Seed Congress, that there will be more seed companies actually taking up this partnership. So I don't know if there's anybody else who would like to quickly share. I saw Michael. I don't know if Michael is there. Perhaps busy. I saw him going in and out. But yeah, look, we will share. I don't know, Steve, if it would be possible to get your presentation.
Yes, we'll share it out.
All right. And so we will be in touch with all the registered participants or potential follow-ups as well. So with that, I guess, thank you again, all of you, for all of your time. We are really looking forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you for joining Seed Talks. And again, to everybody, happy International Plant Health Day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.